Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. T. Sai Chandramouli, former Associate Professor of English, Railway College, Osmania University, Hyderabad. In this module, let's discuss the poetic works of Matthew Arnold and estimate his craftsmanship along with salient features of his poetry. Matthew Arnold belongs to the Victorian age and typifies all the values and salient aspects of the age in which he lived. The Victorian age may be termed as an era of changes. It marked intense intellectual activities, and people were preoccupied with social, religious, political, economic, and scientific aspects of life. Opulence and capitalism, expansion of industry and prosperity, birth of new ideas and unconventional ideology dominated the thought process of the people and the works that were produced during the period. It may also be termed as an age of discontent. In Victorian age, rational approach resulted from the collapse of existing values and rise of class conflict. Clash of science and religions, clash of traditional moral and new sex ideology dominated the works of the people. The age also witnessed rise of gloom and melancholy, doubts about the existence of God, aesthetics and utilitarian sensibility. Coming to Matthew Arnold, we may say that he is a versatile genius, a great poet, perceptive critic, wonderful dramatist, above all, a remarkable social thinker of his age. He was born in the year 1822. His father, Thomas Arnold, brought him up with proper values of religion and society. He had his early education at Rugby School. Matthew Arnold joined the Balliol College in the year 1840. He was elected a Fellow of Oriel in the year 1845. His friend Arthur Hugh Clough plays a vital role in shaping the personality, scholarship, and writing skills of Matthew Arnold. He owes his reputation to a greater extent to his intense and affectionate friendship with his friend Arthur Hugh Clough. Matthew Arnold was appointed a Inspector of Schools. Subsequently, he became aware of the evils existing in the contemporary educational system in England. Of course, he was appointed as a Professor of Poetry and joined the Oxford University in the year 1857. His works do speak for him. He is a versatile writer known for social criticism and art criticism. He delivered a series of lectures and they were all published. We may recount some of them. On Translating Homer was published in 1861. On Translating Homer's Last Words was published in 1862, and Celtic Literature came out in the year 1867. Lectures during his visits in America too brought him glory. He talked about discoveries in America, which was brought out in 1885. He also delivered a lecture titled Civilization in the United States in the year 1889. Coming to his poetical works, we may mention The Raveller and Other Poems, which was published in 1849, and a bunch of poems were brought out in the year 1853, and then poems of second series came out in 1855. Merope Tragedy came out in the year 1858. Then Poems Collected Edition was published in the year 1889. Among Arnold's masterpieces, one can talk eloquently about Theseus, Shorab and Rustum, The Scholar Gypsy, Dawbeach, and Arnold's prose works too are significant as far as the content, composition and expression are concerned. We may mention certain of his prose works like English Criticism, England and Italian Questions, Culture and Anarchy, Irish Essays, Discourses in America, Literature and Dogma, God and the Bible, Church and Religion. Coming to the poetry of Matthew Arnold, it's pertinent to know certain concepts associated with Arnold and his theory of poetry or his theory of criticism. He felt that there should be a need to balance genius of the author and demand of the epoch. He also felt that poetic thoughts can be expressed both in poetry and verse. Poetry is the criticism of life is often said and attributed to Matthew Arnold because he has seen poetry as a criticism of life and stuck to this dictum throughout his career as a poet. High seriousness and grand style do mark his poetical works. Poetic thoughts must be close to spiritual aspirations, he felt quite often. And then he also opined poetry presents man in harmony with nature. That was his endeavor too. He tried to establish closeness and compatibility between man and nature. Any kind of tampering with nature by man was never condoned by him. Test of poetry is truth, Arnold quite often used to say. Then he felt poetry contains moral profundity. He was also sure and asserted that a poet must be interested in the problems of real life. Anything that is away from the aspects of real life, anything that's not related to the reality of life one leads in a society, become totally irrelevant, however beautiful the thoughts might be, however effective the expression might be. I quote, "Poetry should have in its treatment noble and excellent action to be rendered in noble and dignified language," unquote. Grand style is often associated with Matthew Arnold and his way of writing, whether it is poetry or say literary criticism or essays dealing with cultural aspects. I quote, "It arises in poetry when a noble nature poetically gifted treats with simplicity or severity a serious subject," unquote. Any perceptive reader who goes through the poetry of Matthew Arnold realizes that the poet is more concerned with the need to elevate, console, and sustain mankind in general and human life at large on this planet. Sublimity in thought and nobility in expression are cardinal to the works of Matthew Arnold because he has devoted a major part of his life to serious thinking about society, people, their plight. Matthew Arnold's thought process and craft might have been influenced by the writers of earlier ages, earlier eras. He appreciates the work of Milton, Dante, Homer, Virgil, Sophocles, not to forget Shakespeare. We may now turn our attention to the poem The Scarlet Gypsy, a lengthy narrative of vagabond Oxford scholar. In fact, Matthew Arnold got inspiration from Joseph Glanvill's book, The Vanity of Dogmatic Zinc. In this poem, he presents criticism of modern life. Here one comes across the poet's preference for the gypsy's way of life, perhaps a sort of unrestricted, unfettered movement in life, in thought, and in action perhaps the poet was advocating. In this poem, a perceptive reader comes across the poet's preference for a gypsy's way of life. Perhaps he is not happy with conditions which restrict freedom of a free-thinking person, freedom of a writer, freedom of any individual in any society at any point of time. The scholar represents uncompromising power of intellect, conflict between imagination and readiness to take on challenges in life. And the poet paints brilliantly the pastoral settings, and the poem is replete with the passages which enhance its appeal on account of the focus on pastoral life, pastoral settings, and pleasure and peace that are associated with the pastoral life, simple life. Oxford University, with its beautiful structures, not only enhances but inspires any creative genius, any creative writer. Stepping into the world of Oxford University itself, precincts of Oxford University itself, elevates the spirit of any perceptive person, any sensitive reader of English literature. One feels sanctified and honored to find entry into the university and its portals. Coming to Scholar Gypsy, we may say that the poem carries 25 stanzas. It offers a panoramic view of a pastoral landscape found around the countryside in England. The poet explores the complexity of modern life and feels that it's not congenial to develop a free thought of any freedom-loving person. There are two aspects. One is strange disease and other is divided aims, which the poet tries to dwell on at length in this beautiful poem. Reflections on the absence of faith, love and hope haunt the poet endlessly, and these are repeatedly seen in many passages across the whole quantum of work of Matthew Arnold. The scholar's quest to regain the happiness of children, gypsies and country folk is appreciable, admirable. It makes one free to move as one likes. It makes one to think and act to the best of one's own ability. The haunting surroundings of Oxford, the pastoral settings do inspire the poet to create an immortal poem titled The Scholar Gypsy. Here one finds the scholar avoiding human company. Scholars wandering in search of happiness on Cunard hills and search for strange arts demand the serious attention of a reader. Coming to summing up the poem, we may say that in this poem, Matthew Arnold expresses his disgust for modern life. His appreciation of nature is evident, manifest in every single line one comes across in this beautiful poem. His quest for simple and sublime life is never ending and amplified in this poem also in equal measure. This poem represents Arnold's criticism about the futility of human struggle. It deals with the idea of immortality. It also talks about defense of primitive life. The scholar represents the poet's idea of solitary life. Perhaps many people love to lead a solitary life, but solitude is not that advisable all the time. Anyway, in this poem, one comes across intellectual struggle and spiritual unrest as manifested by the wanderings of the scholar gypsy. Well, there is a balance of thought and action in this poem, and an unmistakable note of elegiac mood is an undercurrent in this poem. Panoramic description of the university, that's Oxford University and its surroundings, and imitation of pastoral elegy are the major and salient features of this poem. One comes across the poet trying to balance classical and romantic elements here. His fine use of language, phrases ornamentation, style and imagery do attract the reader's attention and make an indelible impact on his thinking. The colorful description of flowers is really beautiful, enriching, elevating. Symbolic representation of man's quest for truth is not singular to this poem alone. It's not specific to Matthew Arnold alone. All poets through the ages have been trying to portray this significant quest of man to find truth, where truth lies and what truth is ultimately. In this poem, colorful description of the flowers elevates, exhilarates the reader, and a riot of colors permeates the whole poem. The symbolic representation of man's quest for truth is not specific to this poem and not singular to Matthew Arnold alone. Any poet, any creative writer, any thoughtful person has been going after this elusive concept of truth. What constitutes truth? What is truth? How it will be like? Have been explored and probed by different poets through the ages, including Keats, who says truth is beauty, beauty is truth, and yea, that's all you have to know. Well, one may also say that truth is one, absolute, and beyond the comprehension of man. It may be one, but it has been interpreted in myriad ways by people through the ages. Dover Beach and other poems was published in the year 1867. This lovely poem, Dover Beach, creates a proper ambience for the poet to express his views on the situation where he is placed at the moment, at the beginning of the poem. As we come to the conclusion of the poem, we find him universalizing, generalizing his views, which are not restricted to him alone or to England or Dover Beach. The poem Dover Beach may be stated as an eloquent expression of Matthew Arnold's spiritual unrest, expression of his own discontent on the failure of his marriage with Lucy Wigton is unmistakably visible. Poem divided into 4 stanzas. In the beginning of the poem, the poet gives an account of the serene beauty of the seashore, the loneliness he finds himself in, and expresses his yearning for his beloved to be by his side. The dashing waves look perhaps disturbing the poet's peace of mind, but they do contribute in their own way to fire his imagination about man and his place in the modern world. The serene setting, moon-blanched sea, and glittering white hills round inspire the poet to look for and long for the presence of his beloved by his side. The ebb and flow of human destiny is reflected by the ebb and flow of waves he views before him. The poet is at once conscious of human suffering, because suffering is not limited to an individual, to a particular era, or to a particular age. It's constant companion of mankind. Well, the poet realizes he's alone, and that sense of isolation fires his imagination, and he longs for establishing contact with like-minded people around, especially his beloved. His contempt for the artificial world is well reflected through this poem. A sense of loss permeates the poem. Contrast between the ideal world of joy and doubts are ventilated amply. I quote, "Nor certitude, no peace, nor help from pain, and we are here on a darkling pain." For the poet, the world looks dark, the world looks bleak, offers a gloomy picture. Man is lonely, isolated, and this solitude haunts the speaker of the lines in the poem as well as the reader as well, because the undertone of melancholy runs through not only this poem but in most of the poems of Matthew Arnold. The lyrical lull of the music and subjectivity do appeal to the reader immensely. One then can say that the poet has recollected spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings when he is alone and tranquil, and transported and created this beautiful poem. The peaceful atmosphere in the beginning of the poem painted by the poet sets the tone for the thoughts to be presented in a systematic manner in the subsequent stanzas. There is a variation in metrical pattern, yes. Irregular meter too the poet has used, but fine phrases, beautiful images do lend grace and grandeur to this lovely poem of Matthew Arnold. I quote, "The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle of furled," full stop, unquote. The poet talks about the time when man was spiritual, man had faith in the Creator, man had faith in religion and the tenets of religion, and conducted himself as a human being. But as the time progressed with the scientific inventions and innovations, making a modern man's life totally chaotic, the confused state of man in his age, that is Victorian age, has been beautifully presented in this poem. The poet says that religion and faith in God alone can redeem man from his feelings of suffering, can alone help man to resurrect himself from a state of failure and from a state of fall represented by the original parents, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden. Growing materialism alienated man from man, man from society, and man from religion. Thus, the modern man in his Victorian society or Victorian age kept himself aloof, cut off all bonds, because materialism obsessed. He was obsessed with materialism and pleasures of materialistic world. Arnold, like later-day existentialists and absurdists, perceives a note of alienation in modern life. This poem is a beautiful vindication of the sense of alienation felt by man, and also provides a solution in the form of a friend staying by the side of the sufferer, offering lending hand, and helping attitude does alone help man in distress. Alienation and isolation are more conspicuous in the modern age. Writers and philosophers have been praying for light because the world offers a gloomy picture to them and to the modern man any time. Now we can say that Dover Beach also carries a series of images which delight the ears as well as the eyes. The poem The Buried Life was published in the year 1852. The idea of man's ignorance of himself is depicted here beautifully. Man conceals his real thoughts and feelings from others cleverly, intelligently at times. Man survives most of the time in his own illusions. absence of real relationship does hamper human progress and individual bliss. Behind external smiles, there are hidden unrests, known to the person who suffers, known to the person who is all alone and alienated. This poem, Buried Life, consists of 98 lines. The first 12 lines of this poem throw light on the poet's desire to read the innermost soul of man and mankind. Controversial discussions do distort understanding between man and man, generally in the human society. Relationships based on love are the only possible redemptive forces or agencies that can help a suffering man in the modern times. A majority of the people conceal their real feelings because they don't want to reveal their true selves. Revelation of the inner feelings lead to neglect and ridicule by others. Perhaps that's what a person who prefers loneliness thinks. Hence, he cuts off all bonds with people around. All human beings feel this sense of solitude, lonesomeness, or loneliness. Loneliness properly describes the state of alienation. Man escapes real feelings, people, and the society in which he is a part and parcel. By cutting off, he doesn't gain anything else. Expression of these feelings become irresistible to any individual. He has to share with somebody or the other. Otherwise, how long one is going to keep them to himself and continue to suffer? Expression of feelings lead to despair, which concludes in obscurity of individual from people around him, from society itself as such. This results in misunderstanding between man and society. Hence, the spirit has to be emancipated in all possible ways, mainly through the agencies of love and understanding. If it comes from the dear and near ones, if it comes from a supportive soul, nothing like that for the suffering individual. Buried Life also carries a tone of melancholy, calmness, calm and sober presentation do strengthen the mood purported to be created by the poet. Simplicity and sublimity in expression elevate the content and theme of the poem. Reflective mood continues here too, and suggestive language and balance of figures enhance the appeal of this poem. To sum up, we may say that Matthew Arnold is a genius, not only a great poet, perceptive critic, keen observer of nature, human nature, and analyzes the predicament of modern man in modern times. He understands the conditions that lead to isolation of mankind and feels that one cannot and should not run away from the realities of life. Expression finds greater significance in his poetry. By expression, he means the need to share. By expression, he means the need to share one's own real feelings with fellow human beings, because in the modern world, man is obsessed by materialistic pleasures as materialistic world and doesn't bother about fellow human beings. This creates a sense of loneliness and solitude, which ultimately throws a man into realms of despair, bottomless pit of desperation and hopelessness. The only redeeming features, the only redeeming aspects are a sense of bonding, a sense of love, a sense of affection, which can be handed over or which can be offered by a friendly soul, an understanding companion. This is what Matthew Arnold tries to convey through his poetical works. Thank you.